I think I just kind of like backed myself into a corner because I was like, I'm not doing this college thing, obviously.
Yeah.
I was like, I've told everybody I'm doing this, and I was like, this has to work. It has to. And there's absolutely no way I am like going to go to school and do that route. Like it's just, I was like, it's not happening. This has to work.
Welcome back to another episode of Chris's Secret Podcast. I am impressed that you found it. On this episode, I had the pleasure of talking with Jake Hamilton. If you're not already familiar with Jake, buckle up because it is going to be an exciting journey where he shares his invaluable insights into how he thrives in the real estate industry. Jake started his real estate career right out of high school, where he quickly became one of the top agents in all of Alexandria, Virginia. Besides being an incredibly successful real estate agent, he's also become an extremely successful licensed contractor where he does home remodels for either home owners or real estate investors. In addition to all of that, he's also done multiple flips and multiple builds where he's actually built $1 million homes from the ground up. His real estate portfolio is absolutely massive. It is one that will make you very jealous and consists of multiple single-family homes and even an apartment building that is located right outside of Old Town Alexandria. And did I mention that he did all of this before he turned 30 years old? He is still in his 20s, and he has this kind of resume. Super impressive. And you want to make sure you stick around until the end of the podcast, where Jake shares some of his secrets on how he helps negotiate real estate deals for his clients. Now, without further ado, I present to you Jake Hamilton. Jake, I appreciate you jumping on. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess it's been a minute. So obviously we met way back in the day. I was helping you out with your payrolls for you and your team. You were helping me show me around a few properties up in Northern Virginia. So it's been probably like a year or two since we really sat down and chopped it up. So what have you been up to, man? Tell the people about kind of who you are and what you got going on.
Yeah, I've been up to a lot. I think last time you and I connected was like 2020 or 2021. Market was just absolutely bananas back then. I mean, I was selling like almost 70 houses a year by myself at the time. So it was bananas. And then, in 21 or 2020, I started flipping and building houses. So I did a number of projects that year, along with selling a lot of real estate. And, 2022 dove way deeper into that. Sold a little bit less real estate than I was doing and continued to just build up my, home building and house flipping business. And the end of 2022, I actually started a remodeling business that kind of ties along with my real estate sales company. So that's what I've been up to for the past couple of years.
Yeah, dude, sick. And I was going to say, I was obviously doing some professional stalking before jumping on here. I was looking at Instagram, and I didn't know how heavy you were now into the flipping and developing and remodeling. That's a totally different turn, I guess, from like when you were showing me houses. Obviously, you were doing some I think kind of investing, but it seems like you've gone, balls to the walls with this with the flipping and real renovating.
It kind of all like came to be in a funny way. Like, I was selling so much real estate. Like, when you're an individual agent, I think like, being a realtor is like when you first get started in it, it's the most like purest form of entrepreneurship because it's like, you're a salesperson, right? And you go sell somebody a service, and your service says, I'm going to help you buy a home or I'm going to help you sell a home. It's really super, A to B, very simple business, right? And I was kind of like, 2020, I was selling so much real estate. I was like, gosh, like I'm kind of bored because it's so repetitive. You know what I mean, Chris? Like it's so like, same thing over and over again. Like I feel like now, like I'll talk to new agents and they'll be like, "Can you believe this happened?" I'll be like, "Yeah, I can."
Yeah, yeah, pretty
But
believable.
yeah, exactly. The construction stuff kind of got started because I had like, when I was 18, I got into selling real estate. I was doing really well at it, and then I was like realizing, all my clients are investors, so like, they're making their money off the backs of me finding the deal, right? And then I was like, but there's also this additional piece to it, which I had to have a very good understanding of, which was the construction side of things. Because like in real estate, anybody can go buy a house and rent it out, but like that doesn't mean that that's necessarily a good investment, right? Like if you went and bought like a fully renovated house and rented it out, would that be a good investment? I'd argue, in a lot of cases, probably not. So my main clientele when I began as a real estate agent was like finding, houses that were distressed and needed work, understanding the cost to renovate them, and then selling them to, my pool of investor clients. And that kind of turned into me being like, hey, I've sold enough of these to where I have enough money to go do this on my own. And that's what I did.
Yep. And that's interesting. You say that when you started, most of your clients were investors. So I guess one, do you know why, or like what made most of them be investors? And two, kind of a second question off of that is a lot of people, a lot of realtors, I should say, not people, realtors hate working with investors. I think it's because they don't understand what it takes to be like they aren't looking at properties from like the lens of an investor.
Yeah.
So do you think it's hard to work with investors, and why were most of them investors to begin with, you think?
So look, I got into the business in 2017. So I was fresh out of high school. I graduated in June of 2017, and I got my real estate license in September. And when you're 18 years old, you don't really have a very big network of friends or family that are buying and selling houses. And that was the those are the cards that I was dealt. I didn't have a big network of people. Like I knew a lot of people because I grew up in Alexandria and that's where I practiced real estate. But I didn't. Not a lot of people were. My friends were in college. They weren't buying houses. So I was like sitting there. And I was like, okay, well, like who could be my market? Like who could I work with? And I was just like, investors or builders, like that seems to make most sense. So I just kind of like went to the grindstone and started like learning it, like listening to Bigger Pockets. I would run numbers on deals that I would think were, deals. And I do this now because it's like they weren't at the back, back
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I'd go to other agents in my office and I'd be like, what do you think of this? And they would be like, I'd say, yeah, that's good or that's bad, and I would just do that over and over and over again. And I finally learned. I was like, okay, this is good, this is bad. You understand rates of return, you understand what cost of capital is, all that type of stuff. And so, I my first year in the business, I ended up probably about 55% of my business was investors, and that was because what I would do is I'd basically go network with wholesalers or I'd go on MLS and I would identify, opportunities where they could knock a house down and build a new one. Bear in mind, back then the market was on this huge upswing and there was still a fair amount of inventory, not like unlike today. So, I would identify an opportunity and I would call an investor. I'd say, hey, here's the opportunity. Here are the numbers that I believe that you could, get if you were to buy the property. Here's how long it would take, your cost of capital. I'd break the whole thing down basically into like kind of like a presentation and then, do what realtors do. I'd go show the property and, negotiate the contract and go to closing. And it was great because, like, when I was 18, I was really poor and all my clients were cash buyers. So they would, they would close in a week.
Like, I need this money to go get some beers, hang
Yeah,
out with the
exactly.
boys. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
awesome. That's awesome. So wait, what made you want to get into real estate? Because I mean, you obviously started. You said you started at 18, right out of high school.
Yeah.
So what drew you to real estate, and what made you want to get into it at such a young age?
Yeah, it's actually kind of a funny story because, like, it goes back a long time. When I was like, I think I must have been 9 or 10, maybe 11 years old, between like fourth and fifth grade, something like that. I had a lemonade stand, and I also cut grass in the summer. Right, I was just kind of like I was, entrepreneur, and you can actually look up my lemonade stand online still.
Really? Wait, what's it called? What's it called?
If you look up like Jake Hamilton lemonade stand something, I think it'll probably come up. I was in an article on Inc. magazine for like best lemonade stand in America. My sister and I, in like I think it was 2011 or nine or something.
All right, I'm gonna have to find this. This is hilarious. Sidewalk Magazine. Oh no, it's too old of an article. It's not up anymore.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
so
find it. I'm gonna
I'll
find it
I'll,
after
I'll
this.
try to find it and send it to you. But anyway, so I had my lemonade stand set up on this corner, and when I wasn't selling lemonade, I was like cutting grass or just doing odd jobs. And there was this guy who lived, or he didn't live, he was a landlord who owned an entire block of houses behind mine and the other adjacent entire block. So I, went up to him one day. I just so happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I knocked on the door, and he answered, and he was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Do you need your grass cut?" And he was like, "Actually, I do," and I was like, "Okay," and he goes, "I need you to cut this lawn, this lawn, this lawn," and he goes and points at like 5 houses. And I was like, "Why do you want me to cut all your neighbor's grass?" And he was like, he goes, he was like, "These are my houses. I rent them out." And I was like, "Oh, okay, so people pay you to live at your houses?" And he was like, "That's correct." And I was like, "Cool." And he was like, "They pay me 1,800, they pay me 1,600." And I was like, "And you could just go like spend that money at whatever you want, like at 7-Eleven." And he goes, "I own the 7-Eleven too." And I was like,
No way.
"Oh." So I guess that kind of like sparked the like idea of like, "Oh, I should like get into this real estate thing." And ever since then I was kind of like, I cut grass in the neighborhood. I did all sorts of entrepreneurial type of things in high school and middle school and whatnot. In high school, I started working for a real estate agent. I did like I had a house costume I would wear, and I would dance around his open houses and the mascot, and get people to come in. I'd go hand out flyers, just like all sorts of just like odd jobs like that. And I did it. Once I got like more into my adolescence, I was like, okay, I want to. I started to think more about it. I was like, I think I want to do this real estate thing because I'd met a realtor who was going to my church at the time. He was my small group leader, and he kind of explained it to me. He was like, "Yeah, so basically, like I'll help somebody buy a home or sell a home, and I get paid 3%." I was like, "Really? That's it?" And he was like, "Well, 3% of 500 grand is $15,000, Jake." I was like, "Oh, how many times a year do you do that?" And he was like 20 times, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it." So, it kind of like sparked this thing in me where I was like, "Hey, like this kind of like seems like this might be something I would really enjoy doing." Because I loved houses. I loved real estate in the sense of like construction. I always like had a fascination for that as a kid. And then I didn't do so great in high school. I was like a 2.0 GPA type of guy. So, and I think it was probably my end of my sophomore year. I kind of basically like decided I was like, you know what, like I'm gonna do this real estate thing. And I was working for a realtor. I was doing odd jobs. I was working retail on the weekends, just like learning how to sell things and whatnot. I was just always researching the real estate business and trying to understand it. And junior year, same thing. And then senior year, I was like skipping class at the end of every single period. I would skip class. I would go and work for a new realtor that I had gotten a job with, and I was working at his flooring store, and I was just like selling flooring out of his flooring store for him and just following him around, learning about, what escrow is, what closings are, all things. Just, you pick up tidbits of information from everybody that you interact with. And he would kind of be like, "Hey, I'm working on this development deal. This guy's buying this. He's splitting the lots. He's doing this, that, and the other." And it's kind of like plants a seed. And I'm like, "Huh, that's really interesting." Then I'd go research it right after the fact.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Now, so wait, what was your childhood like? Like you're talking about all these things that you did basically before you graduated high school, but was your childhood just always focused on business? Were you doing sports? Like what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, so I played lacrosse like all throughout my childhood, up until about high school. I stopped playing like sophomore year. I played on the golf team for a year, and then I was just junior and senior year of high school. I was just like full on like, "Hey, let me like try to set myself up for success with this." Like at that point, I was pretty much completely bought in. Like I was gonna go get my real estate license, and I was gonna go and try this.
Dang. So you were already kind of dead focused on business and I guess real estate specifically that young at that young point in your
Yeah,
life.
it's funny because like I had like other jobs like outside of real estate, and like I would talk to people about it, and they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, Mr. Real Estate over here," and I'd be like 16.
Yeah, no, and it's funny that you say that because I was kind of similar, more so on the like entrepreneurial side when it
Payroll
comes
side of
to
things.
payroll side. Yeah, I just grew up. I was like, yeah, I want to do payroll one day. No, but I always wanted to do like I honestly just wanted to own a business, but I was doing a lot of like e-commerce and drop shipping and that type stuff
Yeah.
in middle school and high school. And so, but it's the same thing where like I for one night I went and worked at there was like a local bar I was gonna do. It was St. Patrick's Day weekend. I was like senior, 18 years old. My buddy had worked there, and he's like, "Yeah, you can like help me do bar back and busboy stuff." And I was like, "All right, yeah, sure, I'll do it." And so I busted my ass doing cleaning tables, bringing to people drinks, all this crap, folding napkins. And at the end of the night, I think I made hours worth of work. I made like $5 an hour or something like ridiculous. Like I got like a check for like $50. I was like, wait, so you do this like every night of your life, and this is what you have to show for it? Like this shit sucks. Like
Yep.
I refuse. I could just go and find something like in a dumpster and sell it on eBay for $50. So
Yep.
it was kind of like that light bulb moment of like, oh, what I've been doing is working. I do not want to go down this path. But yeah, that's hilarious that you were also young age trying to get the hustle going. So did you end up going to college?
Uh, yeah, I did. I went to college for 3 weeks. So like my mom had enrolled me into school, and it was the community college.
Okay.
So I did not want to go. I was like super adamant. I'm like, this is a complete waste of money. Um, and my mom's an academic. Like she's got, I think, 2 master's degrees, and my stepfather also has like 2 or 3. Like this was like, not their cup of tea that I wasn't going to college. So anyway, they like signed me up to go to college, and I was supposed to get an associate's degree in construction management.
Okay.
Which I guess was a blessing in disguise because like, people always ask me like, how do you get all these investor clients? And I was like, I don't know. I guess like right place, right time, because my professor, who I ended up, I kind of befriended him. I went up to him the first day of like class because he kind of gave a syllabus. He was like, "Hey, I've built an airport. I've built a hotel. I've built houses. Blah 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 blah."
Yeah.
He has now. I teach this class to stay out of the house and away from my wife, and my son and I flip houses. And I was like, "Oh, target acquired."
Yeah.
Went up to him after class and I was like, "Hey, I saw that you said you flip houses." And I was like, "Well, I'm a real estate agent." And he's like, "I already have a real estate agent." And I was like, "I figured you might. That being said, I saw this opportunity your real estate agent probably hasn't presented to you." And he was like, "Okay." And he looks at it and he's like, "This is a trash opportunity." I was like, "Okay, well, shoot." I was like, I basically decided like I'm not going to go back. And then I went back because my mom and I got in a fight and she forced me to go back. So I go back for the second week. And I'm not paying attention at all in the class. It was just, I was like not engaged.
Yeah.
And I went on MLS. I found another deal and I went up to him and I said, "All right, this is something you need to look at." And I just put it on his desk and I sat down and I was sitting like this. And I was just like, "What do you think?" And he looks at it and he like starts jotting some numbers down. He's like, and then he stands up and puts his stuff in his bag and he's like, "Let's go." And I was like, "To the house?" And he was like, "Yeah." I mean, he's like, "You're an 18-year-old real estate agent. I don't think you have any other clients right now." And I was like, "You're right." Which at this point I had probably sold, close to 10 houses.
I mean, that's still like
Yeah, I was breaking, I was getting my feet in the water.
Yeah.
We go, he looks at the house for like literally 2 minutes. Like I remember like pulling up and like getting back in my car and starting it. And it's like, when you like, it was just very, stop and go. And he's like, "All right, write it up, all cash, close next week." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So, offer gets accepted, yada, yada, yada. We go to closing. At closing, he says to me, he was like, I say to him, I'm like, "Hey, I'll see you in class in like an hour." And he's like, "Don't ever show up to my fucking class again." Verbatim. And
Really?
he was like, "You're doing this." He's like, "You're good at this." And he was like, "You're not doing the construction thing. You're not getting a degree." He was like, "You're doing this." I've sold that guy probably close to 30, 40 houses at this point.
Really?
Yep.
Dude, that is sick. So wait, was that like the moment that you're like, "All right, I'm not going to class anymore"? Like, was that kind of like the final nail in the coffin of I'm dropping out?
Yeah, I'd planned to stop going, but now I had a relationship with a guy, so I figured I'd keep going to, see it through, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, like, yeah, he and I've done a lot of deals together. He's a good friend now. It's just been, it's a good relationship. But he was kind of like probably investor number one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, dude, that is hilarious. Now, what were your parents like, or what was your mom like when you're like, "I'm not going anymore. Like, I'm officially done"?
I didn't tell her.
You didn't tell her?
No, for like probably the good part of a year.
So she thought you were just going to school for a whole year?
Yeah, like I was like calling like friends from high school who knew how to use computers. I was like, "Can you like make my Blackboard account look like I've gone to class?" And they were like, "Yeah, no problem." Like it was a whole thing.
Wait, so did she pay for like another semester? And you're like, she's like, "Oh, how's freaking English 101 going, Jake?" And you're like, "Oh, it's going good, Mom."
Yeah, exactly.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Now does she find it like funny? Is she happy with where things are? Or is she still like, why didn't you finish school, dude?
She's basically like, "Why didn't you finish school, dude?" Still,
Really? Still to
yeah.
this day?
But like that's their culture, you know. They're like,
Yeah.
you know,
That's funny. That's funny. So, in your stepfather, what did he do? Like, was he like professor or was he a business owner? What did he do for a
now
living?
he's government contractor.
Well, cool. Well, let's jump over to as far as when it comes to real estate. It seems like you have your hand in like every little bit of real estate. You obviously are doing helping people with buying, helping people with selling. You're doing flips. You're doing new builds. What would you say is like your favorite area right now to be helping out with?
You know, my real estate sales business is kind of like it's almost like automated at this point.
Okay.
Like I'm not doing too much lead generation per se. Like what comes in is what gets serviced.
Okay.
So a lot of people who I've sold houses to in the past, you know, regular consumer home buyer, home sellers, they'll refer me business or they'll come back because they need to buy or sell. And those are the clients I work with and with my investor pool. So I'd say my business is probably 60-40 when it comes to investor to, you know, regular home buyer, home seller ratio.
Hmm.
That's 60% of it being investors. So that being said, it's like it's a nice business because I definitely don't work a 40-hour work week selling real estate, but I'll sell this year. I think I'm at 26 transactions closed and pended, probably be 27 by the end of the night.
Yeah.
So I'll probably sell 40 units this year, somewhere in the realm of, you know, $30 million.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's like I don't really have my foot on the gas with that. When I
Yeah.
was, you know, at my peak of being a realtor, I was selling $40 million a year. I think my best year was $42 million as an individual agent. And I think I
Sheesh.
sold like just under 70 units.
That's bonkers. What
Yeah,
is 70 units like? Like your top year as an agent, what did you bring in as far as like an annual earnings from just selling houses?
that was probably just under $1 million in commissions.
Jeez. And did you have a team that was working underneath you? Like how many people did you have kind of helping you out run that business?
At that time, I had a transaction coordinator. I had a director of operations who did like client service. So like when I would sign a listing, he would take it over and communicate with the client and whatnot. And I had a showing assistant.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
bonkers. So, I mean, obviously you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but like what were you profiting off of that
Yeah, no,
business?
I'm happy to talk about that type of stuff. You know, when you're a realtor, you probably after everything said and done, you pay your brokerage, all that type of stuff. You probably net about 50%, and that's probably about where I was, maybe a little under 50%. My expenses at that point are probably a little higher than they should have been. Um, and my expenses were too high mainly because like I had a really hard time with leadership at the beginning of my career and like leading other agents to kind of help me offset my expenses.
Yeah.
Because when you grow as a real estate agent, like I'm tapped out at 40 units. I can't really produce a good level of customer service if I'm selling over 40 units. And that
Yeah.
goes for pretty much everybody. That's almost like an industry norm, I think. It's been
Yeah.
written in some books and whatnot, like the Red Book, which every realtor has read.
Yeah.
That's in that book. So I was selling 70 about, and I had a showing assistant, so she was doing the showings, and I had an operations guy. So I was, you know, I was providing good level of customer service. I was well leveraged, right? But I could never really solve the piece of the puzzle when it came to like, hey, how can I have an agent that works under me that works just the, I don't know, $200,000 to $400,000 buyers, and I
Hmm.
go and I work everybody that's over that, and I just take maybe half of their commission, and they
Yeah.
can produce on their own as well, that type of
Yeah.
thing. I
Yeah.
never really was able to master that system, that process, or that level of leadership.
Yeah.
So the business was, you know, it lacked in profitability.
Yeah.
My business at that time probably could have been in the 55 or 60% margin range, but it wasn't because I didn't have that like one key player that was producing and
Hmm.
bringing in income to help offset some of the expenses. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And do you think, I mean, just to be honest, I mean, I feel like part of the reason for that is, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but dude, you were young as hell, killing it. And I think it is kind of hard because typically someone up here is looking for somebody in like what was your age range at that point, which you know, you're a freaking teenager, like in your young 20s.
Yeah.
Do you think that was part of the problem is that you would be trying to get somebody to come in under your wing and like, I'm not listening to you. You're a freaking kid. It's like, yeah, well, I'm a kid, but I'm also outselling you. But like,
Yeah,
that's when you double
I
what you're
think
selling.
that definitely had to do with it, had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, And that's, that is what it is. But like, here's the thing is like, I was like, okay, like I'm making, let's say it's 550 grand a year,
Yeah.
selling houses, probably my, best net year as a realtor.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to get to that million mark. Like, how do I get there? And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this whole team thing really isn't working for me. I
Yeah.
was like, I can't. I was just like, I kept bringing agents on. They'd work for me for 3 months, and then they would, fizzle out.
Yeah.
And it was just like a, up, down. It was a roller coaster. And I was like, this is
Yeah.
like, it's not working. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep selling all this real estate, and let me go and flip and build 3 or 4 houses a year. And that should be able to make me the money that I want to make to be able to bring me to the income level that I want to be at.
Yeah. I mean, that's sick. Now, in your first year, how many houses did you sell, like your very first year of being a real estate agent?
24.
24. And then your best year, you ended up scaling up to, you said 70?
It was like 67 or 69, I forget. It was just under 70. It was really annoying it was under 70.
I mean, that is kind of crazy. But also, I feel like 24, what's the average real estate agent sell in a given year? It cannot be 24 houses.
I think it's like 4 or 6 or something.
Okay, so you hit the ground running. So like what would you advise for a new agent as far as like how to scale up their business as quickly as you did?
Like I did a lot of things, and the biggest thing I did though that I realized now looking back on it was like I was just consistent with everything. So like I did a lot of cold calls in the beginning to stay busy in between when my investors would buy something or when I'd meet somebody at an open house or whatever. I had my toes in a lot of different ponds, if you want to, put it that way. Like I would, I'd get to the office at like 7:30 in the morning, and I'd start cold calling people at like 8 o'clock, and I'd do that until like 11. And then at 11 until like 1, I'd be doing follow-ups. I'd call people I met at open houses. I'd call people I cold called who said they had interest in selling. I was always just lead generating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't really have a lot of leads handed to me when I was in the business. I worked on a team, but I mostly worked on that team for admin support. And that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made because I'm not an administrative type of person. Like I'm just like, I don't comprehend, administrative tasks very well. I still fail epically at them. But it was great because when I was on that team when I was 18, it gave me this like opportunity to just kind of like lock myself in a room, lead gen all day, and know that Susan, the team assistant, would take care of everything else that needed to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So I had a very, very clear understanding from the beginning of me getting into the business that my job wasn't to do admin work because that's not what I was good at. My job was to lead generate.
Yep. Love it. And now, that is a good point because I just got my real estate license. Now I'm doing it. I don't really plan to ever show anyone a house or do anything like that. I'm just doing it so I can open the door for myself. I just want to be able to drive by a house and open up the door and see what it has to offer. And I probably still will be using agents, and obviously I still reach out to you. And if there's an opportunity up there, I'll still be using you because at the end of the day, I don't think I'm necessarily the smartest person when it comes to writing the contract and make sure I'm not screwing myself. But I just want to be able to open the door. But something that was tricky for me, just given that I'm kind of in a unique situation, I'd be interested to hear your perspective. For a new agent, how did you go about picking the brokerage that you wanted to work at?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of like didn't really pick. I was working for a realtor my summer between senior year and me getting my license. I was doing cold calls for him, so that's where I kind of learned how to do that. And he and I ended up parting ways. And I knew another realtor from my church that I went to growing up, so I reached out to him. He was at a Keller Williams office in Falls Church. He and I sat down and we talked, and then I went and met with the team that I actually ended up joining at the Keller Williams office in Arlington. And I ended up working with them for about 18 months. And then, I went out on my own. I hired an assistant, and I did that whole thing. So I didn't really think too much about it, honestly. I didn't think like, oh, should I be at Long and Foster? Should I be at, Weichert, or should I be at Keller Williams? I just kind of like fell into the decision and, ended up there.
Okay,
which has worked out really well. I love my company. I love the owner of my company. He and I have a really good relationship, and it's been great for the past several years.
Got it. And you're still with KW, right?
That's right, yeah.
And are you a broker now, technically? Like, do you have your broker's license?
No, I thought a lot about getting it, and I haven't. Maybe I'll get around to it someday.
Yeah. I mean, it's also kind of one of those things. I feel like at your spot, which I want to kind of get into in a second with like the investing and the flipping, you probably don't need the broker's license, especially if you don't want to scale up and if you don't want to kind of figure out that piece. And that's something else I was going to say as far as like managing a rep underneath you. I feel like there's really good sales reps and then there's really good sales managers, and you're not necessarily, even if you're like the best freaking sales rep in the world, you don't necessarily want to manage, because I feel like sometimes you're like, dude, why don't you work as hard as I work? You know what I mean? I feel like it's sometimes hard if you're a top producing rep to then be able to teach somebody how to do it, because it's a lot of it's like you're saying, it's not really teaching, it's just doing. And some people just don't want to put in the work.
Be a realtor, like I said at the beginning of the show, like it is the most simplest form of entrepreneurship. You go sell somebody a service, which is you helping them buy or helping them sell, and you go perform that service. And there's no cost of goods sold. There's no like degree. There's not really any training. Like it's just like it's really the most simplest, purest form of entrepreneurship. And you know when you see a realtor that's not making it, it's very obvious to me. Like the realtors that make it and that hit the ground running, they become successful immediately. They're entrepreneurs, and a lot of the times, those realtors that are super successful in the beginning, they don't stay realtors forever.
Why do you think that?
I think it gets. I don't think it's tedious. I think it gets very boring for a lot of those types of people. I think they're like, all right, I mastered this. It's easy. Like, what's next? So you see a lot of guys, you see a lot of people, a lot of guys, gals that get into the real estate business that are very successful the first couple of years, and then they're like, they come across another business venture or they start flipping or investing or what have you. But it's a really great entryway for you to, kind of build up capital, because it's a high paying job.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, you're talking about obviously your work ethic and kind of, dude, you were freaking, 18, going into the office at 7 in the morning, just ripping dials. Like, there's not a lot of people that are that young, that are that hungry. Where do you think you got that work ethic from?
It's funny because I kind of look back on it myself, and I think it was like, I think I just kind of like backed myself into a corner. Because I was like, I'm not doing this college thing, obviously.
Yeah.
I was like, I've told everybody I'm doing this, and I was like, this has to work. It has to. And I was like, there's absolutely no way I am like going to go to school and do that route. Like I was like, it's not happening. This has to work. And I was just like, at that point, I learned based on talking to other agents, meeting with agents. I would like go and just, pick people's brain and ask, but I would ask like real questions, like, have you ever had somebody reach out to you and they're like, hey, I want to pick your brain? And like 90% of the time when somebody asks me that, I'm just like, no. Like, if you want to ask me a real question, like I'll tell you everything. I'm a complete open book.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of new agents that'll come up to me and they're like, hey, Jacob, like, I want to pick your brain on how you get investor clients. And it's like, sure, dude, I'm happy to tell you everything I know about how to get investor clients. And, that person who asked that question, they're probably not going to get my time. But the person that comes up to me and they say, hey, Jacob, so I have been cold calling cash buyers for the past couple of weeks, and I've been saying this script, and what do you think of what I'm saying? That I'd be like, hey, well, this is exactly what I think. You think you need to tweak this? Because that's a legitimate question. It's like, you can't find that answer on Google. You have to go to somebody. That person has exhausted every resource that they have, and their last resource to get the answers to the question they have is to go to somebody like myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I was that person. I would like go and ask very legitimate questions. Like I'd go up to agents who are also cold calling in the office. And I'd be like, hey, so I said this, and then this person said that. Like, what do you think I should have said there? And I would, I'd learn.
Yep.
But I would never go and try to waste somebody's time. I would always like come and be like, I'm completely stuck here. I've done everything I can to try to get to, where I want to go, but I can't quite figure it out. So what do you think?
Yep. No, and I think that's a very good point that you just made, because it's the same thing where I'd be doing, like when I was, at ADP and helping you out, I'd have all sorts of people come up and be like, hey, how do you do this? How do you sell so much? And it's like, well, like, I do a lot of work. Like, what are you doing right now? They'd be like, well, like I'm like, just working, man. Like, but what are you doing? It's like, all right, well, I can't, like, I don't, like, give me something that I can help you with a specific
Yeah.
thing. But exactly like you're saying, where they're like, hey, man, I've been going into the CPA's office. I've been dropping them off X, Y, and Z information. Like, why isn't this work? Okay, cool. Yeah, well, let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Let me see what you're handing out. And I can actually give you some more useful information. But if you're just like, hey, man, how do you sell so much? It's like,
That's a stupid question.
yeah, like, I don't
Yeah, it's just like,
know.
I don't like, give me something here.
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
always told everybody, like, I mentor a kid who he graduated high school last year, and he really, like, I love this kid, and he came into he works for me now and everything. He was an intern for me, and he does a whole bunch of just things for my business still. And in 2020, he called me up and he was like, "Hey, what's up? My name's Will, and I'm on your brother's lacrosse team. He told me you're in real estate. I'm thinking about getting into real estate because this, that, and the other. I don't really know if I want to go to college. I know you went that route, and I was wondering if I could sit down." He literally was saying it so fast, and I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, but the whole time he was super intentional about what
Yeah.
he was like, what the point of the meeting would be.
Yep.
So I like show up to this meeting, and I was like, "Hey, buddy, I'm leaving for vacation tomorrow at like." 8 in the morning. I can meet you for coffee at 7. And he was like, "Cool, I'll be there." And I was like, I did not have to leave at 8, but I was like, let's see, like, is this 16-year-old or 17-year-old kid or whatever, however old he
Yep.
was, does he really like want to sit down? And he was like, "I'll be there at 7 in the morning to meet you." So anyway,
Yep.
he shows up, but I sit down and he like pulls out this notebook and he opens it up and he's got like probably like 15 or 20 questions like written down. And every single question was like super like it's not the type of stuff you could Google.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I mean that's genius. Also, that is a good little lesson for people out there because I've done the same thing on both ends, where either someone's reached out to me looking for advice, or I've reached out to somebody else looking for advice. And dude, there's all sorts of times exactly what you're saying, where I know for a fact I'll reach out to somebody and be like, "Yeah, come over to my house at 8:30 at night. I've got like 20 minutes that I can talk to you." And it's like, "All right, well, I'll be there." Half the time, they don't need me to show up that late. They just want to see if I'm actually about it. Like, and I do that all the time with people who are like, "All right, yeah, I can help you out. I'm gonna forget. Text me tomorrow at 8 o'clock and remind me, and I'll call you at like shortly after." Half the times they never text you because
Exactly.
they don't actually want it. So like, just note to self: people like if you're looking for a mentor advice, sometimes the mentors will throw in a little like, "Hey, let's see if you're actually about the life or not." So that's hilarious.
Exactly. Because like you can tell, you can 100%
Instantly.
tell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
instantly. It's so funny. So wait, what has it been like being a mentor? Like, how many people have you kind of helped out? Because obviously you're a big person in the space, especially up in like the Alexandria area. Has it been like a
Um,
fun part of kind of getting to that next step is actually being able to share the information with the next generation or the other people that are trying to come up alongside you?
yeah, dude, I love it. I love helping that kid out and just getting him on the right path in his life. And like one of the things he was struggling with, he was like, "Should I go to college? Should I not go to college?" And I was like, we had a lot of long conversations about it. He ended up going, and I think it was what's best for him to be able to figure out, what he wants to do and whatnot with his life. But yeah, I wouldn't say I've mentored a ton of people. Like I would say that's kind of the only example I have in terms of like that type of situation. I'd love to do more of it. It's just finding the right people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's also very time consuming. Like it's
Yeah.
at least if you're going to be a good mentor, like, because I only helped out a handful of my buddies, like, buy properties where they're like, "Hey, man, I'm like trying to buy something. Like, is this a good deal? Is that a good deal?" And it's funny because, I probably had a dozen, 2 dozen people reach out to me trying to, like, seek advice on how to get a good property. Really, there's only been, like, I think 3 people that actually followed through. Like you're saying, with, like, good questions, showing me good properties. I'll tell them, like, "Hey, man, like, I would run the numbers this way. Here's, like, a book I would recommend you listen to or
Yep.
read, or this is a podcast you should check out." And there's only been 2 or 3 people that have actually done that, except all those people ended up buying houses. So it's like, if you're willing to put in the work, good things will come. It's just sometimes hard to find people that are willing to actually put in the work. They just want to be handed stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. Well, I have a question. Obviously, you reached out to me. I'm bummed. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it one of these years to your client appreciation event. But what is it
Yeah.
like putting on that event? Kind of what made you want to start that? And I guess also, can you kind of tell people what it is that you do around that client appreciation event?
Yeah,
Annual
I
event
do
that you put
like
on.
2 client appreciation events a year. It's really just to kind of like engage my friends, clients, sphere of influence, that type of thing. Keep them top of mind. know that I'm still in the business and whatnot. I usually have, 50 to 100 people. My fall event definitely gets a lot more people than my spring event, but it's fun. I got to like catch up with my clients. You know, we get to drink beer, have ice cream, and it's just like one of those types of things where it's like it's a marketing thing. I do it to stay in front of my people every so often.
Yep. And how much money does it cost to put on like an event like that?
Not a lot, honestly. We get a lot of sponsors, so maybe the whole thing like 3 or 4 grand.
Okay, that's not bad. And is that mostly coming out of your pocket or the sponsors' pockets?
I would say it's split evenly.
Okay, cool. And how much money do you think you get either directly or indirectly from putting on an event like that?
Something like that, probably $200,000 in commissions.
Really? Just from an event like that? And why do you think that?
Well, like it's a little hard to pinpoint, but it's a little easy at the same time because it's like, for instance, like I sold somebody a house in 2017, and it's like, what? Like we're not this client and I, we're not like best friends. We have nothing in common. Like I sold them their house, and that's it. Like we have a good relationship, right? Like we like each other. We can talk and catch up. But it's like, I don't have a reason to call this person, 3 times a year for any other reason except for my event. So anyway, they're selling their house, and that's ended up going up in value crazy. So there's $30,000 commission. They're buying a house, so that's a $40,000 commission. So like they're already a third of what this event will produce, and
Yeah.
it's directly correlated to staying in touch and being top of mind.
Yep, yep. And I think it is kind of tough for some people to realize how successful those type things can be because there's not like a direct dollar amount that's like, all right, I run this Facebook ad and this many people bought my product from the Facebook ad. It doesn't really work like that with these type of networking events and like client engagement activities.
Yeah, well, it's like with our, remodeling division now. So we're doing like kitchens, baths, basements, and things along those lines for people. And I'm realizing so quickly, I'm like, like brand recognition as a realtor matters so much if you're farming a neighborhood, or it matters most with your sphere of influence and the people that you know, right? It's like when you're like a general contractor and you're doing that type of thing, like, your sphere of influence will keep you pretty busy. Like our business, this year we'll probably do a little over $1 million in revenue just from the remodeling business.
Yeah.
And, that business, I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, like the scalability of this business is so high because you can get such high brand recognition with things like trucks and with things like, mail or just things like television ads, all sorts of things like that where as most people know a realtor that they'll call if they need to buy or sell, or their cousin's a realtor or what have you, right?
Yep.
But not everybody has a like reliable contractor that they'll call if they need to do a bathroom or whatever it might be.
Yep.
So I've looked at the marketing for that business so much differently than I have when it comes to being a real estate agent.
Yep.
And it's crazy because I look at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, like there's so much like scalability with something like this.
Yeah. And so beyond, obviously you're talking about like doing trucks with, your logo and stuff on the side, but like what other ways have you been doing marketing specifically now transitioning over to like the renovating business? How have you been trying to kind of scale that business and market that business?
So most of it's been like a little bit of online leads, probably a third there, a third of like sphere of influence, just past clients of mine. And then another third of people who have inquired about properties that we flipped. So we'll flip a house and we'll do an open house and the neighbors will come and they'll say, hey, I want to do a house. I want to do my property just like this. And we'll say, hey, well, we can absolutely do that for you.
That's genius. So you literally will flip a house, you'll put it as an open house, and you'll stand there and just have leads walk in the front door.
Yeah, dude, we had one where like I was like stressed the house wouldn't sell because the only people that were coming were neighbors. And we didn't really make a lot of money on this flip. Which is part of the reason why I started the remodeling business. Because I was like, dude, I'm making like 30, 40, 50, maybe 50 grand on a flip. And I was like, that's just like for all this work and all that risk.
Exactly. There's a lot of risk. Yeah, there's a lot of risk in those flips.
The risk reward is not there. I was like, I'm done with the risk reward. Whatever, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
So I still will flip houses, but it's like it's got to be a really good deal. Like I got to be making like close to 100 grand to go and take on the risk myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started the remodeling business because I'd built up all these crews over the years of flipping and building houses, And I realized one day, I was like, I have all these crews, I have all these people, I have all these contacts, and I got my contractor's license mainly so I could keep flipping houses at a higher scale, pull my own permits, that type of thing.
Yep.
And then, like, leads started walking through the door of my open houses for the houses I had flipped. And, you know, it's like somebody came into my open house, and this was like a condo I had done, and they were like, how much would it cost to do this kitchen? And I was like, I just literally threw a number out there. I was like, about 50 grand. And they were like, that's what I thought. And they were like, I was hoping to do that at my place. And I was like, well, I'd love to come take a look at it and give you a quote for it. And there was born the renovation business. And that, you know, that condo project, we ended up making like 40 grand on it. That kitchen, we ended up making like 25,000. So I was like, at that moment, I was kind of like, okay, I'm definitely onto something here.
Yep. Yep. And so you've just developed like a crew of people that can help you do the renovations just by doing your own flips?
Subs, all that type of stuff, yeah.
Interesting. See, that's genius. And now where are you finding, and now obviously you have the connections now where you're working with all these different people. I've this question, I get this question all the time, so I'd be interested to hear if you have any other tricks up your sleeve that maybe I'm not using. But I've obviously invested in real estate. Every market I've gone into or every house I've purchased has been in a completely different market. So I'm having to get all new contractors, all new, handyman, painters. Everything has to be new every single time I do a house project, which has been kind of annoying because you have to like go through the same headache of finding good people over and over and over again. However, what has been your trick to finding good, reliable work? Because I will say finding good, reliable blue collar people is sometimes very difficult. Actually, a lot of times very difficult. Hence why you're making so much money doing it. It's because it's really hard to find good ones. So what's kind of been your trick to finding good, reliable work there?
Here's what I tell you. I think that contractor has to, for them to be good and reliable for you, they have to know that they have something to lose.
Okay.
If you're going to give them one job, like, whatever. But if you're going to give them 5 jobs or whatever, 10, if they can see typically they'll, be a lot better than anyone else. So like when you're a realtor, you can gather a lot of contractors because like you have a lot of listings. You're like, you tell your crews, you're like, hey, crew 1, go do the carpet here. Hey, crew 2, go paint over here. And your clients just trust you. They're like, okay, hey, he sent this crew and they're going to paint and we're going to pay them. And that's how it works, right? You build up crews because you have a lot of business as a real estate agent if you're producing a lot of business, right?
Yep.
And then, you're like flipping houses and you're like, hey, dude, you're doing all this work for my clients that I'm referring you to. Come and do this flip for me. And they're like, okay, yeah, no problem, I'll do it. And, then you build, and then they sub it out to somebody, you meet that sub, and then you've got all this huge network of people. And, like, I guess I kind of think at the root of your question, you're asking, like, how do I find cheap but quality and reliable contractors? Is that right?
Sure, yeah, we could go off that. I like that.
And like, you get what you pay for in the sense of if you pay for a lot and you get a little, then you overpaid. And, shame on you for overpaying. And if you get a little, like you don't get a very good rate of, like you don't get a very good outcome and you paid for a little, well, yeah, there you go. 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a really happy medium right in the middle. And that's the hardest part, where to find those people. And the way you find them, it's not, I honestly, I'm sure there's a bunch of stories of people meeting their contractor on Angie's List and whatnot. But I really think it comes down to, you being able to just have a consistent flow of work, because then you can kind of sift through the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Because if you have one house to do and you have a house in Ohio and you live in Colorado, like, how are you gonna measure the quality of the work? One, how are you gonna say, hey, I need you to do it for cheaper when you're not doing anything because you're in Colorado, right? Like, you got no leverage there.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll say what you said is very true. Like, having more work helps out a ton. And I've done the whole gamut of the sketchiest, cheapest contractors in the world showing up like missing teeth, like freaking hungover or on drugs trying to like do my drywall to, massive crews that have come and like will knock out like a whole like bathroom remodel in like a day and a half. Like, how did you just finish that so quickly?
Yeah.
So like I've done them all, and it is also like you're saying too, is more work you have, great. Also just kind of getting in there and just meeting everyone on the job. Like, so for example, I had one of my favorite contractors I work with right now. He does all my AC repairs and new units down in North Carolina. And the way that I found him is I hired a big company to come out and do my AC. I'm at the house just chopping it up with the guys that are on the crew. And the main guy that's on the project, I'm talking to him, shooting the shit. And I end up texting him like later that night because I just get everyone's number that I can. And so I text him, later that day, like, hey man, appreciate it. Might need somebody to come do the back house because there was 2 houses on this property. And he's like, well, dude, I'm about to leave my company. So if you want, I can just do this work on the side after I leave in about a week, and I'll do it for $1,000. Keep in mind, I did the front house for $4,500 to do the exact same deal on the back. It's like, dude, if you buy the unit, I'll do it for $1,000. And I was like, done, and done. And so it really is like important to get in there and just meet everybody that's involved in the project, because you never know what's going to happen with those relationships and those connections.
I know, it's crazy, and it's like that's a huge thing. I mean, I've always, like, whenever I've had a big company come out to look at anything, I always ask, I'm like, so what are the odds you would do this off the books? And just see, because like it's never happened to me where somebody would be like, oh yeah, no problem, I'll do it. But like, some of those guys, they end up leaving someday. So if you get their number, it's like, you tell them, hey, reach out to me if you ever need a job. And, hopefully you have a job at that point for them to go do.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where, like, yeah, I'm never trying to, like, hire them necessarily, like, off of their crew, but, dude, like you're saying, so many of these people, like, almost nobody's end-all, be-all dream goal is to be like, yeah, I just want to work for this guy and make $15 an hour for the rest of my life. Almost all these contractor guys are like, I want to start this on my own one day, I want to start painting on my own, I want to start doing HVAC installs on my own, I want to do X, Y, and Z on my own. So it's like, yeah, you just stay in touch with them. Eventually they're going to be on their own and looking for jobs to do. So
if you become the guy that has the work, then your number will just be, it'll be shared. I get calls all the time from guys like, hey, do you need work? Do you have work? Do you have work? And that's all they ask. I'm like, what do you do? And they're like, everything. I do. They like tile, and they're just going on and on. And it's like, all right, yeah, I might have something for you.
Yeah. Well, also, I will say off of that, because I get the same thing too, where people are like, oh, do this. But another thing, going back to like that mentor thing where I kind of like test them, I'm sure you do the same thing with these type guys is, dude, I'll test them out with a small project. Yeah, I need this bathroom painted, or I need this bedroom painted. If they don't show up on time, if they don't do a good job, if they aren't like, sending me before and after photos like I ask them, it's like, all right, well, good job. You tried you had your one chance and now you lost it. So I guess I won't be calling you again.
Dude, I do the same thing. Like I've got properties that I rent out around here, and I just like, hey, send them out there. I'm like, hey, go and, retile this. I look at their tile work. I'm like, all right, this is pretty good. Or no, it sucked. You get out.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, dude, I had a guy that I met at a Home Depot. I was so excited about it. He was talking such a big game. He's like, yeah, man, like I do all this work on the side, blah, blah, blah. So I hired him to come out and put it just LVP down in one of my bathrooms. And I got there and I was like, Jesus Christ, like what did you just do? Yeah, so I had to like rip it all out and put it down again. But yeah, it's just like one of those things where you have to kind of test them out and see what they got to offer.
Now you just gotta have consistent work.
Yeah. Having consistent, and that has been probably my biggest part that I've been slacking on, is not having them all in one place. Like all the properties in one place does make it hard to have super duper consistent work. Like I always have work, but it's always like a different project here and there. It's never like, I always need a painter, or I always need a guy doing flooring, or, whatever it is. But anyway, so you have some investment properties. So like, what do you have in your portfolio right now as far as like your personal investment properties that you got going on?
Yeah, so I've got an apartment building right outside of Old Town Alexandria, an 8-unit there. I've got a handful of like single family rentals, and then I have one condo, which I'm about to sell my condo. And
Okay.
I lend out money too, so I've lent out, some money for hard money lending, which is, it's been fine. So
Really?
that's kind of, I'm actually like right now is the first time in like 2 years that I don't own any houses that I'm flipping.
Really? Interesting. Yep. That's crazy. So wait, what got you into the apartment complex? Because that's something that I've been kind of like keeping my eye on now is kind of the next play that I'm looking to do. I've done a bunch of like single family and like small multifamily properties, but apartment complex is the next play that I'm kind of eyeballing. So what has your experience been doing in apartment?
Yeah, so it kind of like it's weird, but remember at the beginning of the podcast where I was like I was always looking for deals and whatnot. This just came up one day, and I was like, I need to find a way to buy this. This does not come up that often.
Okay, interesting. And so how'd you end up acquiring it? Did you get like did you go in with partners or did you
Yep.
like do the whole thing yourself? Okay.
I went in and I got a strategic partner who helped me set up a fund, and then I raised I think we raised about $600,000 between the two of us, friends and family.
Okay.
And
Sick.
then we're actually about to deliver it. We're about to go to market with it here shortly. So
So you guys are renovating it right now and
it'll be
about to rent
finished.
it out?
We renovated the whole thing. The whole property was in disrepair. Rents were at 1,400 where they should have been at 28. Like it was just the building was very, very, very mismanaged. So we took it over. We gutted the entire thing. We added washer dryers in every single unit. We added bathrooms in every unit. Like we did a huge renovation. The renovation in and of itself was actually probably one of the largest projects. I've built houses, ground up, but this is probably a more complicated and larger project than just building a house.
Wow. And so all right, well dude, let's do you listen to Bigger Pockets, let's do the deal dive right now on this. This is sick. So like what'd you end up getting this place for?
Listed for $1,800,000. We went under contract at $1,650,000, and then in due diligence we negotiated down to $1,485,000. So we
That's
closed at $1,485,000.
That's sick. All right. Well, actually, quick little shameless plug for yourself. What is the importance of having like a good educated realtor through like the negotiation process? Because so many times, like when I was new to real estate, I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, are you sure we want to, offer like at asking? Like what if this is wrong, that's wrong, this, that, and the other." So, what's the importance and kind of what's your strategy around negotiating deals for yourself and your clients?
Well, the agents who are bad at negotiating are typically agents who don't sell a lot of houses.
Yeah.
Because, like, let's say you came to me and you were like, Jacob, I need to buy a house. Here's my criteria. And we find your house, right? And let's say you say to me, it's life or death if I don't get this house, right? How often does that really happen? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
when is it ever like life or death if you don't buy this house? It's like it's never. So it's
Never.
like
Yeah.
when you're a realtor and you're in a negotiation, it's like most realtors suck at negotiating because they need the commission.
Yep.
So they're negotiating more so against their client. It's the
Bingo.
realtor versus their client to get the deal to keep going through.
Yep.
Which in a lot of cases, the client like they might actually be trying to make a very bad decision, and the realtor has to coach them through it. But like
Yep.
a lot of the times, you see realtors just like, hey, let me get you into this house and let's move on to the next one. It's like when I started having a really consistent flow of business, this is probably after being in the business for about a year, my negotiation skills went up so much because I didn't care if the deal died or not. If it
Yep.
dies, it's like whatever. Like I'll list it and put it on the market again. And agents will always say this. Like they'll always be like, "Oh, don't you not want the deal to die?" And it's like, well, I don't care if the deal dies. Like what? Why
Yeah.
would I care? Like
Yeah.
it's what's best for my client. Like that's what
Yep.
I care about. Is that not what you care about?
Yeah. Well,
You
dude,
and I might be misaligned.
yeah. Well, it's so true too, because like it's crazy that so many people are like, it's just in sales in general, the person that loses the negotiation is always the person that needs it worse. It's always like because like you're saying, if I don't care that the deal doesn't close, you don't care the deal doesn't close, like whoever cares more is going to end up losing. Like if I don't want to buy or if I don't want to sell the house, then it's going to be really hard for you to negotiate against me and try and get a good deal for your client. And vice versa, if I really want to sell the house and you're like, well, I got another 10 houses I could go show my client, well, then I'm going to be at the disadvantage. So yeah, I think being able to just be like, look, man, I'm only moving if it's a good deal. And that's going back to like when I was mentoring some of my buddies on buying properties. I'd be like, dude, why does it matter if you end up losing out on the deal? Because so many people get so emotionally invested into the deal when it's under contract. It's like, it has to close. It has to close. Like, it doesn't have to close. Like, it's not the end of the world if it doesn't end up closing for you. Because,
Exactly.
unless you screw yourself with your, when you're kind of setting up the contract, and you're going to lose a bunch of like earnest money or whatever it's going to be.
I've done this a long time in the sense of like, no, I haven't been in the business for 30 years, but like I've done hundreds of transactions, and I've never had one person ever lose their earnest money deposit, and I've had countless people go into default.
Dude, it's so nice to hear. Yeah, it never happens to you because you know what you're doing, you know how to set up a contract. But I see so many people that are just like, dude, I had a realtor once tell me your earnest money deposit, or actually in North Carolina, because they do due diligence. So they have like due diligence where it doesn't matter what happens with the house, you lose it. Like, it doesn't matter if you put the house under contract and the foundation's like completely fucked, you lose your due diligence money. And I had agents say that I should put the entire down payment as my due diligence. So, like, if the down payment is going to be like $50,000, like, yeah, you should just make the due diligence $50,000. Like, no. So then I have absolutely no leverage. Like you're completely screwed. So yeah, it's nice to hear that you're not doing that to your clients.
I had one a couple of months ago where like our client went into default, and I was negotiating it, and it was, I mean, they had like, they just blatantly didn't go to closing because they had cold feet. And it's like, hey guys, look, you're in default of the contract. You were supposed to go to closing today and you didn't. So you're in default.
Yeah.
And the agent was negotiating with me. She's like, we're going to take the whole earnest money deposit, blah, 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 blah. And I said right back to her, I was like, I mean, yeah, you can go for it, but like, we'll simply will not sign a release. And what's going to happen if you don't sign a release in Virginia is that, the title company takes the money that they got as the earnest money deposit and they send it to the court. So then you have to go settle in court. And I was like, and I explained to her, I was like, this is what's going to happen. You want to go down this road. I'm going to instruct the title company to send the money to the courthouse, and let's just settle it there. Your clients can spend 10 grand on attorneys. My clients are happy to spend 10 grand on attorneys. We can situate there. And then 5 months from now, the market's probably not going to be as good of a place, and your sellers won't get their price. And she was like, because, it's like, it's EMD. It's like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to, what are your, like, you want to do that for 5 months when tied up in court?
Yeah, dude, that's hilarious. Well, dude, we're already at an hour. I don't know how we're already at an hour. I told you I don't keep it. Yeah, I know, it's insane. I could talk. I literally wanted to ask you so many questions about flipping houses. So we're gonna have to do another episode where I just exclusively talk about like flipping and developing, because I've done a lot of like flips and holds, but never done any like development, and that's something I'm thinking about kind of dabbling in. So I will definitely be reaching out to you with some questions there. But anyways, I guess just to wrap us up, like, where can people find you? How can people reach out if they're interested in help either buying a house or renovating a house?
You can follow me on Instagram. It's Jacob Hamiltons, so HAMILTONS. Feel free to follow me there. Shoot me a message if you want. You can, I try to post consistently when it comes to the projects that we're working on, all that type of stuff. And yeah, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Sweet. Well, dude, I really appreciate you coming on. It was an absolute blast picking the brain of somebody that is absolutely like one of the top contacts on my phone that I reach out to when I have a real estate related question is you. So it's nice to have somebody in my corner that I can ask some tough questions to that most people don't understand. So I definitely appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully people enjoyed listening to you talk, man. It was sweet.
Yeah, it was fun. Let's do it again sometime.
All right, peace.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chris's Secret Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It would mean a lot to me if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel at Chris's Secret Podcast, or follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify at Chris's Secret Podcast once again, or follow me on Instagram. It's just at Chris Arslan. And remember, if you want to get involved with the show, reach out to us and ask us a question, and you might be featured here on the show during what is my favorite part of the show, the mailbag. So if you want to get involved, it's very easy to ask me a question. Just slide into my DMs on Instagram. Once again, that is at Chris Arslan. Or leave us a comment on YouTube on our latest YouTube video, or leave us a review on Apple Podcast and ask us a question in the review. Remember, 5 stars only, please. And until next time, figure out some ways to make some passive income so I can see you out on the slopes or on the pickleball courts. So until next time, peace.